building beneficial relations with customers and stakeholders. Union Bank of India, good people to bank with.
Hello and welcome to Bloomberg Quint. Last time the World Cup was played in Australia and New Zealand, which meant we Indians had to wake up at 3 a.m., give or take, in the morning to watch some of the matches. Yet we made up for more than half of the 700 million viewers who watched the matches in 2015.
Come 2019, it's in England with Wales that the Cricket World Cup's happening. Matches starting at 3 p.m. Perfect for most Indians to rush back from work and catch more than an innings most evenings. Guess who stands to gain most from this? Star Sports. And joining us to talk about how the entire business cricket is shaping up this season is Gautam Thakar, CEO of Star Sports. Gautam, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
We're about close to a week into the tournament. How's it shaping up so far? A couple of the early games were a bit mild, and then you've had interest pick up in the last couple of days.
Yeah, it's been exciting. I think you're right. Some games were much shorter than we all expected. But, Pakistan's game yesterday, for those of you who caught it against the favorites of the tournament, was Pakistan's always unpredictable. Bangladesh doing what they did against South Africa. We believe this World Cup is probably amongst the most competitive World Cups that has ever been. The format is also tough and exciting, but the teams seem quite evenly matched, so should be an exciting World Cup ahead.
And how does all of this augur in terms of growth of viewership as well, Gautam? I mean, one is you would have a sense of how many people go in and view the matches live, etc.,
Yeah.
because you will be doing those stats. But the other important question is, because you guys are now unequivocal leaders when it comes to the sport of cricket, digital, TV, etc., how has the growth been? How is this World Cup looking like?
This World Cup we think, will be the biggest World Cup ever. This year,
It always is, isn't it?
It always is. No, not always. When it was in Australia, as you rightly said, sometimes the time zones versus the 2011 in India, which India won, things sometimes can be different. But this will be the biggest World Cup ever. This IPL was the biggest IPL ever. We think the World Cup will do even better in terms of total viewership. We had about 460 million people watch the IPL on TV, and almost 300 million people watch it on Hotstar. There'll be some overlap between the two, but these are staggering numbers, right? And I think if you think that the World Cup is going to do more than that, which we think it will, it's going to be a great summer of cricket from our perspective.
No fatigue at all for a cricket viewer who just came off 6th week of the IPL?
We all thought about that coming in, as you might imagine, two big tournaments, one after the other. My personal view is the World Cup is such a massive property once in 4 years. Perhaps if the World Cup were before the IPL, maybe, who knows, because the IPL has its own benefits. India is playing every day in the IPL, some team that you cheer, whereas that's not true. But the World Cup just brings in new audiences, and they may not be for every game. Maybe they will not watch as many of the non-India games, but the audiences for India games are casual viewers, housewives, everybody wants to watch. And India-Pakistan is on a holiday, and that's going to be, in my judgment, the biggest day of cricket for many, many years. So.
And India-South Africa tomorrow. Let's wait and watch what happens again on a holiday. Just before we get to some numbers, Gautam, just wondering, when we see the kind of interest that comes in for a football game, 90 minutes or maybe 100 odd minutes, it gets over 2 hours, you still have your day. Similarly, T20 IPL, 3-4 hours, happens at 8 p.m. to 12. Your day is still balanced.
Yeah.
Compare that to a 50-over match, and it takes off a lion's share of your day.
That's right.
Is a 50-over game in a World Cup or otherwise still drawing enough viewer interest when you compare it relatively to maybe an IPL? I'll leave football World Cup because that's just a completely different ball game.
It's a good question, and it's a fair sort of worry, I think, if you will, for people running the sport to see what's the balance between test matches, one-days and T20s. But what we've seen for the World Cup, some of what you said is more true for perhaps bilateral tournaments, etc. But the World Cup is just the national pride that it evokes, I think draws the audiences through. To give you a sense, India matches particularly historically rate in the 8 to 10 ratings for a World Cup, whereas the IPL is in the 6 to 7. So it actually rates better than, even though the duration is so much longer, right? Now things get affected whether it's weekday, weekend, but on average. So we see that the India games, there is no impact. In fact, audiences love to stay through the evening, and as you said, at England there's a favorable time zone, at least for the second innings, after hours to watch it. So we are actually very confident that that fatigue factor or the long nature of this is not really coming into play.
How much head and tail are you able to enjoy to the event, pre-build-up and post? So you have the telecast hours.
Yep.
Before that and after that is where you're able to tailor a lot to produce
Yes.
content.
Yes.
What's the tail and what's the head and tail you've been able to enjoy to be able to juice out some of that programming, to juice out some placements that you'd like to do for partners?
Yeah, absolutely. One is from a sponsors, advertisers perspective, but more importantly to provide context to the viewer. We call it PPL, pre-post shows. The pre-show and the mid-show, which is the mid-innings break, do really well. IPL, unfortunately, has tended to start ending later and later. And so the post-show, there's a significant drop-off because it's already close to 11:45. But pre and mid do really well. And especially for big games, people are interested to come and watch. Also, what is happening today, it's a small trend, but we see it, fantasy is picking up. And so people want to come to listen what's going to happen on that day and which players they should pick. So it'll take time, but the way this has worked in the West, I think this will, one day the pre-shows will become pretty important for the core users who are participating in all of these. So.
Okay. A lot of us wonder, Gautam, when these bids are placed for specific tournaments or 3 years of Indian cricket, 5 years of Indian cricket, and the numbers keep on getting bigger and bigger. And then one wonders as to how is it that the business will be made. And I know that when the bids happen, the next day a lot of newspapers have these articles about, per match itna hai, per ball itna hai, and kaise paisa banega, and all of that. You obviously do it with some method to the madness. Can you tell a bit about that? I mean, how is the whole business shaping up?
Yeah, look, first and foremost, let's take the IPL, which is the biggest number thrown around, $2.6 billion. If you look at the bid, and you guys have all seen it before, the delta between us and the next was a very small number. 500
crores in total in the global.
over the 16,500 crores.
That's right.
So it's not an irrational bid in as much as the market is pretty much in that zone. So everybody's done their math in whatever fashion they've done. 2 years in, we are very excited because we are ahead of plan. On what we thought we would be on the revenue. We have 3 revenue streams.
This is specific to the IPL.
Specific to the IPL, because that's more an annual property, which is easier to sort of benchmark year over year. There's advertising, there's distribution or affiliate revenues, and syndication, because we took the global rights. In all counts, we are excited about where we are landing. Frankly, year one, and Sony did a great job in getting the IPL to a certain level, and so we are excited to have that platform. We grew at 27% in viewership in year one, and we have grown at 13% or so this year again, on top of that already massive base. So from an advertiser's perspective, there is nothing else. This year is 2 things, IPL and World Cup, but there is nothing else that gives that kind of reach and impact in such a concentrated period of time. So a lot of our advertisers on IPL are also advertising on the World Cup. Most of our sponsors from last year came up again.
So that I was going to ask about that. So now you've had the IPL for 2 years. You've had ICC events since the start of the decade, or just before that.
Right.
With the ICC events, to get a sense of consumption and who's advertising, how have you seen the advertiser basket change from car companies, telecom, things like that? Can you give a sense of who's reaching the viewer right now in wanting to sell? Yeah,
so car companies historically have been, or automobile has been big. There's been a little bit of slowdown right now. Telecom is big, always big, both from domestic, international players coming in. We are seeing a lot of new sort of interest over the last couple of years from the internet space. Obviously, some of these players who are with us, whether it's Dream11 or Swiggy, there's a natural fit. You kind of watch sport, you order food, you do things like that, Amazon. So that sector is actually, there's gone through ups and downs over the last 5 years, but over the last 2 years is really, really growing. We're excited also because now fast-moving consumer goods are starting to see value. Coke has been a big partner.
But that's because it's an ICC partner.
For IPL.
Okay.
Coke was with us for IPL and is going to probably, is also on the ICC as well. And we've seen that women's, the numbers have grown as well. And so if we can broad base to even FMCG, which historically has not been on IPL as much, or on cricket, or any sport as much, then it will be even better because the depth that offers in this market is massive.
Okay. If I can get back to the previous question, though.
Yep.
So how is it that the business is shaping up? I mean, you were getting to the point of how advertisers are advertising on both platforms as well. How are the numbers shaping up with the bids that have been put?
Yeah.
How does the money making, has the money making grown? You may not be able to give specific advertising rate numbers, and I want to get into that also. But revenue growth, etc. How are all of that happening?
Yeah, we've been growing year over year. We grew almost 50% in our first year versus the previous year's combined sales.
This is only IPL you're talking about? No.
IPL. Because it's hard to compare World Cup. It comes after 4 years.
Okay.
So it's there's so many factors at play. If you look at the World Cup this year, I think order of magnitude versus the last World Cup, we'll do more than 3 times the revenue. So, but that was 4 years ago. It was in Australia. It's hard to compare. IPL just gives a real health indicator of the business of sport, and it's consistent, right?
Okay.
So in our first year, we grew almost 50%. This year, we are growing close to 30%. So these are large base of revenues, and so to continue to deliver that, obviously because viewership's also growing, I think the math of it works for our partners.
And again, if this does not mean you giving out some specific numbers in any fashion whatsoever, how does the ROI work in such a thing? Your revenues might be going up, but the bids that you've put in and the expenses that you do in order to generate the kind of content that you do, how does the ROI on these events then shape up? Yeah, is that also moving up year on year?
We look at it in aggregate for the cycle. So for the 5-year bid, for example, we would have a certain path that we have defined year on year. Obviously, it's a growing number as we go ahead, and we ladder the costs also in that fashion. And like I said, for both of the first 2 years, we are ahead of our internal plans. So, never say, the future you can't predict, but so far so good.
You gave some numbers on how much of the IPL was via TV and on Hotstar. What are your targets, or what sense of, in terms of share, are you seeing that mix between TV and digital? I'll split down TV and languages a little later, but just to get that sense between what share are you seeing between TV and digital? Right?
Yeah, so from a consumption, we look at metric internally, billion minutes of consumption. It's the easiest way to sort of decipher. There's about a 15-16% of total consumption was on digital, and the rest was TV. That number was about 10-11% a year ago. So, it's growing nicely. We think it'll easily be in the next 3 years upwards of 30-35%, which, because the pace of growth. Now, a lot of these things are determined on, the data plans, all of these things. We've done some deals with Jio where it's free for some users, all of that. So those investments will determine, but right now the pace of growth is nice in digital. And to be honest, it doesn't really matter to us where a user is watching, because our intent is to grow the category of sport, and that's why we like to take global rights, which include TV and digital, so that there's no conflict. If you want to watch on digital or TV, it's.
But the ad rates would be different, right?
They're different. They're different.
Massively different, because I see. I'm just a thought. Like when I was seeing the yesterday's match, in between the 2 overs, there were a lot of Hotstar show promos or ads,
and not commercials.
And not commercials. On TV, it's commercials. So is it a stark difference between Hotstar and Star TV HD?
It's not, in the end game, it's not that different when you look at it from a consumer or a cost per consumer perspective. But it also depends on the priorities of the business at that point of time. So we are significantly investing in Hotstar Premium right now. And so this is a great, opportunity for us to showcase some of our new shows that are coming up.
At the cost of potential revenue?
Yeah, because the business is, if you want to grow the premium business, driving subscriptions to that is a big part of our agenda. I think as part of Disney now, the whole segment of streaming is something that Hotstar was already a leader, and we want to go even harder. Though you will see even on TV, while you've probably seen many more ads, if you will, we are certainly not only advertising the rest of the World Cup games that are coming up, but also Kabaddi, which will start immediately after this World Cup. So we use our commercial inventory to further our own strategic interests pretty judiciously.
The day that Star won the IPL bid, Bloomberg Quint had done a conversation with Uday Shankar, and he'd given down some sense of breakdown of what he said was about 50 crores a match for an IPL game, and he put a test match at about 43 crores a game. The company chose to retain the domestic rights. In the way you're talking about an ICC event being, and viewership on an India game being higher than even the IPL, how does the third part fit in, where in a bilateral game, is there still enough bang for the buck for a bilateral series?
Look, there's no doubt that viewership on Test cricket is much lower than viewership for T20 or ODI formats. But there is a tribe of people who love the. Some of you, I would assume, certainly I love it. I mean, there's nothing like the attritional batting to save a game, even though after 5 days it's a draw. It's a small group, I mean, relative to people watching the IPL. So typically we would say that a T20 game has probably 3x the viewership or more sometimes of a test match, right? So test matches don't monetize as much because of that reason. But it has a role. I think there's a vast audience, and one thing we were talking before the show, when so many hundreds of millions of people are watching, segmenting by various customers and what they prefer it works out very well for us.
What's your language mix right now, say the IPL, and this is the first week, probably once the India match starts, you'll get a better sense. What do you expect your language mix to be? How much of this is English, how much of this is Hindi, and the 4 other regional languages?
Yeah, so roughly about 20% of consumption is in English.
Okay.
About 50% is in Hindi, and about 30% is in regional languages. Now you will note that regional languages, we launched Telugu, Kannada, and Bangla 6 months ago. Tamil's been around for a couple of years. So in a very short order, just as a fun fact for what it's worth, 2 years ago, IPL used to be consumed in Tamil Nadu, 96% in English and a little bit in Hindi. This year, it is over 90% in Tamil and more consumption in total. So, it's very clear. India loves its mother tongue wherever you are, and it's just a comfortable language for those of the people who want it to be in that language. I mean, I mostly watch in English, but I know my mom has been asking me, when are you launching the Marathi channel? So, it's not that she doesn't know or doesn't watch English, but it's just a comfort level which I think we are seeing out in the numbers.
Any plan of Gujarati channel as well? Just wondering.
Not yet.
Okay, no, just wondering. So, is the growth in Hindi much higher than the overall viewership growth? Just wondering. I mean, the Hindi viewership.
Well, languages growth is higher just because it's small base.
Okay.
So
But Hindi I thought was 20-odd%.
So Hindi is 50% of the total. But I'm just saying from a growth year over year, because languages didn't exist, so it's gone from almost 0 to 30 in the last 2-3 years. So it's dramatic. English is, I would say, flatline. It'll probably decline a little bit.
Okay. You think so?
I think the languages will continue to grow.
Will there be a proportionate impact on revenue as a result? So is there an impetus that you'll have to push through and target revenue on the regional language side that you're going to see if there is viewership plateauing? You'll have a domino on advertisers being saying, look, you're not a growing market anymore.
So just to clarify, I think overall viewership even in English is growing, but the ratio of English as a proportion of total
that's what you mean.
Is going down. And we sell nationally, so we don't segment our, especially for the large properties, World Cup, IPL, etc. We don't segment as Tamil only in Tamil Nadu. So it's a national sale. So as long as the total viewership is growing, customers and partners are happy.
Okay. A couple of, one clarification. You said T20's 3x test matches. Where do ODIs fit in between?
ODIs in between the two.
In between the two. Okay, so T20 is higher viewership than
not in absolute minutes, only because the format is smaller. Is the way it is.
But otherwise,
you're not afraid of a non-World Cup ODI fatigue because it's that weird length in between where the purist watches the test match, the guy who wants to watch, or the girl who wants to watch something for 3 hours is able to watch the T20. Is there any conversation going on with boards and other stakeholders in how to keep the ODI game going?
We've been talking, and we, as a stakeholder in cricket or sports, that we like to see ourselves as, certainly for the Indian subcontinent or India at least, with the BCCI, with the ICC, there's a lot of meaningful conversation on what is the future. I think there is no disagreement from anyone that if you want to expand the game, T20 is probably the future. I think the World Cup as a format has been ODI for a long time. Now we have T20 World Cup. So there is some amount of interest in history and legacy in retaining that property, and therefore a build-up of the rankings to that property. What we have seen and what we have sort of shared from our data, this could be different in Australia, England and other places, is that bilateral series are good, but multilateral ODIs are better. So, we used to have back in the day the triangular Asia Cup or the Benson and Hedges triangular. Those generate more interest. It sort of creates more rivalries. So I think, at least from our perspective, we sort of share that to say, when you look at the next cycle, because these cycles are decided well in advance. You know, from 2023 is when the next cycle will be formulated, and we are all working towards what's right for cricket at that point of time.
Just a fun question. Outside of India, Pakistan, which would be the biggest match, I'm sure. What else? Is it India, Australia, or is it something else?
India, Australia, and India, England. I think this year, because England is,
such a favorite.
at least till yesterday, was the clear favourites. And it's in England. So, the stadium, I think a lot of people are excited because I'm expecting the stadium to be 65% or more blue.
Blue. Yeah,
actually,
on Sunday.
On Sunday, actually, I shouldn't say blue because that day it's an away game. So India is going to don a new
color,
orange-ish blue color. But it'll be Indian. Birmingham is going to be, ablaze with India. So it's fun to be in England, and it feels like a home game.
It feels like a home game. That's true.
But those two will be the big games.
Sorry.
No, please continue. I have a business question.
Plan on this, because we talk about specific games. It's to your advantage that both events on the day of the final are yours. You have the men's cricket final and Wimbledon on the same day. Given a choice, your segment head wouldn't be happy with that, right? Because I know there are different audiences watching tennis and cricket at the same time of the day, but scheduling like that isn't ideal.
Yeah, it's not ideal, I think, and not so much from us. I mean, cricket is massive, so, we'll take it. It's just from an interest in growing sport. One of the things we talk about at Star is sort of our role, if you will, is to inspire India to play. And, cricket is great. We don't need to do much. The heroes are there. It's happening. We just enable it. How do we do that for other sports? So tennis, for example, if a Wimbledon final happens on the same day, it's a shame for audiences that could get inspired if Federer is playing Nadal, whatever it might be, right?
My apologies.
No, not at all.
And by the way, the
FIFA
World Cup had the same issue last year.
Always, right? Always, yeah.
So it's, it's the way the coin toss has happened. So.
Yeah. Well, it's a pertinent question. Yeah. It shows the fan in Kaushik of sport. He's, of course, going to London day after to watch the matches himself. But one question, the last 6 months, and final one from mine really, the last 6 months, when we look at businesses, etc., I've been talking about how the consumption growth seems to be slowing down within the country. I wonder if it showed in the way companies bid for ad slots, even for an event as marquee as the World Cup, because frankly, profitability for a lot of consumer companies has gone down. A lot of usual suspects are not earning as much. Have their ad spends been comparable to the inflated levels that you would have expected?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, this year we grew more than 25% over last year, so on IPL. And because the World Cup is still work in progress, if you will, but what I will tell you is that, and I was mentioning this to somebody else, is that a month before the opening, we normally look at opening day as the sort of key day. A month before opening day of the World Cup, we had done more of our targets than a month before IPL. So, we felt like we didn't see it, we didn't experience it. Now, it's the benefit of two large properties. Perhaps there was other places from where people cut budgets. And because of the schedule of the World Cup and everything being known so much in advance, I think companies also plan. So I think
a couple of semi-technical questions, right? The fact that over the digital platform, you're able to offer audiences a bit of interactivity in what they're able to say there, what they're able to choose and what they want to watch, or switch language there.
Yeah.
Has that meant that what was imagined 8-10 years ago as that television needed to get more interactive for it to retain the engagement with the audience, the need for that has gone down because that's been supplied by the digital side? Do you get that sense that the potential cost you would have had to incur to keep somebody engaged to television is being serviced elsewhere?
Yeah, I think there's certainly no doubt that digital is doing a lot of that, playing that role. I think if television is able to do some of that, it will benefit. But frankly, we see a lot of co-viewing. Okay. People are actually watching the game but are commenting on their phones, and so it's not we find it extremely complementary. I think, in fact, what we see is that the in-between hours, the commutes, etc., digital is super helpful. I mean, you can catch up, you can stay connected. I think somebody was joking because some of the games go on late, the household TV is off, but the interested sport enthusiast switches on his small screen and, below the blanket from the old Bajaj ad, I don't know, from 30 years ago, is sort of coming true today as well. So I think it's a complementary medium. On Hotstar, though, to your point, we've launched with IPL last year this watch and play. So you can sort of, while you're watching the game, play a quiz. This year they've launched a social feature, which is actually great because the idea is to make it like you're with your friends. So for example, you could create a private group of your friends And it's like while watching, you can abuse the captain's decision with your set of people. So even though they're not with you, you have a beer next to you, you're typing away as you normally do these days. So you're with friends and you're watching the game on the small screen. So
Jay, one more thing about something we were chatting about just before this conversation started. To get a sense of what else India is watching beyond cricket, if you can give a sense of what, in terms of share, what's attracting viewership right now beyond this one game the country is obsessed with?
yeah, cricket is massive. Kabaddi is the #2 sport in this country.
At?
We have about 300 million people saw Kabaddi last year on TV. It's bigger on TV than on Hotstar. I think that's fair to say in relative terms. Hotstar, the share is slightly lower than that of cricket. Soccer or ISL, which is the local league, does a little shy of 200 million. So those are the three big sports, if you will. Now, of course, when the FIFA World Cup comes on, soccer viewership in aggregate may go up, etc. It's actually interesting though, because a lot of people say, well, especially in urban centers where we all live, and the Premier League is a big deal, or European football. But the relative audience for a Premier League is many fractions smaller than for the ISL. So that's a little known fact that people have. I think audiences in everybody assumes, oh, Premier League, great quality football. But what it lacks is the local affinity. If you have a Kerala team playing in Kerala, I mean, the stadium has 50,000 people in yellow, and there is a massive support that the Premier League will take some time to get to.
One last question from my side, which is, a year and a half ago we stood it saying, okay, you had the ICC rights for a while, you had BCCI rights for longer, you got the IPL a year back. Is there any property out there, cricket, non-cricket, that Star is saying, I want that next?
We feel great where we are, because if you think about it, I think one of you mentioned earlier, what was the thinking around taking few properties? ICC and World Cup is the marquee properties in cricket. I think we have to have that as the home of sport, which we like to think we are. IPL is obviously a fantastic local innovation, bigger than anything else as a media property. And then the BCCI gives year-round continuity to the sport, right, from the months of September to February. So sort of it allows a cricket calendar interspersed with kabaddi, soccer, other sports that we can do. So we think the current template of the portfolio that we have, we feel very good about. So if we never added anything else over this cycle, we'd be good. But opportunistically, as things come up, we'll certainly take a look and see what makes sense.
Well, pleasure chatting with you today, Gautam. Thank you so much for taking the time out and speaking to us at Bloomberg.
Super, thanks for having me, and hopefully you get to watch some games on your trip.
Yeah, hope to see you there too.
Yep.
If you have been, thank you.
Celebrating 100 years